In the cold, clean world of Vancouver's financial district, invisibility was something Bridget Okafor had learned to weaponize. She was not the kind of woman anyone expected to find on the 42nd floor of Vail Capital Group. She knew that. The security guards downstairs always hesitated a half-second too long before waving her through, their eyes doing that small, involuntary calculation. The dark skin, the wide hips, the sensible flats, the blazer that had been tailored twice because off the rack never fit right across the shoulders, then the badge, then the nod. She had been doing the math of other people's expectations her whole life. Bridget had grown up in Oshawa, Ontario, the second daughter of a Ghanaian-Canadian nurse and a man who fixed industrial refrigeration units for a living. She had won a scholarship to U of T at 17, finished her actuarial degree in 3 years, gone straight into her CPA, and been hired by Vail Capital at 26 because her supervisor's supervisor had looked at her file and said, "This one doesn't make mistakes. Not this one is brilliant. Not this one is exceptional. Just no mistakes, as if her value were measured in the absence of error rather than the presence of genius." She was 29 now, and she had not made a single mistake in 3 years. She was also completely, utterly invisible to the man who owned the building. Constantine Vail. She always thought of him in full, both names. The way you thought of weather systems and courtrooms and other things that had the power to change your life without meaning to. Was 38 years old, 6'2", and possessed of a stillness that made every room he entered feel like it had been holding its breath. He was the grandson of a Ukrainian industrialist who had moved to Toronto in 1991 with nothing but a container of machine parts and a talent for reading which way a market was about to fall. His father had turned those machine parts into a logistics empire. Constantine had turned the logistics empire into something that moved quietly through half a dozen industries and left very few visible footprints. He was also, by every measurable standard, not someone who noticed Bridget Hannigan. That was her name, her full name. Bridget Hannigan, her mother's maiden name, which she had taken back at 25 after a relationship that deserved fewer words than she had already given it. She used it quietly, wore it quietly, did most things quietly. She was the woman who had restructured Vail Capital's entire internal audit framework in 4 months and sent a 14-page report to the executive committee. And 3 of those executives had emailed Constantine to congratulate him on finding such a capable team, as if the report had assembled itself, as if she were the building's infrastructure, essential and entirely unworthy of being named. She ate lunch at her desk. She arrived before the cleaning staff. She left after the security shift changed, and Constantine Vail had never, in 3 years, said her name. He knew it. She had seen it on routing emails, copied to him, her name right there in the header. He had initialed her reports. He had, twice, forwarded her analyses to outside consultants with a single-line note, "See attached. Proceed accordingly." And those consultants had billed $300 an hour to tell him things she had already told him for free. He was not stupid. He was simply the kind of man who moved through his company the way a stone moves through water, creating ripples he never tracked back to their source. This was fine. She had decided it was fine. She was not there to be seen. She was there to build something, and what she was building was a record of competence so undeniable that one day, in one meeting, she would walk out with the title of Chief Risk Officer and a salary that matched her actual contribution, and she would smile, and it would have been worth it. That was the plan. The plan ended on a Tuesday in November, when the building's fire suppression system malfunctioned on the 39th floor, and Bridget, running late from a client call, stepped into the only elevator that was still working and found herself standing 18 inches away from Constantine Vail. He was on the phone. She faced the doors. She had her laptop bag on one shoulder and a takeout container of pad thai on the other arm, and she was determinedly, professionally pretending he did not exist, which was what she did every time their paths crossed in corridors and glass-walled meeting rooms and the lobby of this building. She effectively ran from the inside out. The elevator stopped, not at a floor, just stopped. Between 31 and 32, according to the small digital display above the doors. The lights flickered once, stayed on. Constantine Vale said into his phone, "I'll have to call you back," in the voice he used when things were not a problem yet, but were about to become one. Then there was silence. The suppression system activated on 39, Bridget said, because she had been monitoring the building's incident log when it happened. It would have tripped the secondary electrical relay. We're probably looking at 30 minutes before facilities gets the elevator grid back online. A pause. You know this how, he had turned. She hadn't, she could feel it. I reviewed the building systems integration last quarter. The relay is a known failure point. I flagged it in Appendix C of the October risk assessment. Another pause. Longer. Hannigan. It was the first time she had heard her name in his voice. It landed differently than she expected. Not her first name. But still. Yes, she said. You wrote the October risk assessment. I write all of them. There was something in the quality of his silence then that she had not heard before. Not the usual administrative quiet of a man processing information. Something else. Something she chose not to examine. The Appendix C recommendation was rejected by facilities, he said. I know, she said. I'm standing in an elevator. She heard him exhale. It might have been a laugh. It might not have been. She still hadn't turned around. They were in that elevator for 44 minutes. She found this out later, from the maintenance log. At the time it felt like no time and also like an entire geological era, the kind that left marks in stone. He had eventually asked her to explain the relay issue in more detail, genuinely asked, technically, following up with actual questions, and she had answered, and then they had somehow moved to the liquidity risk she was modeling for Q1, and then to the Vancouver real estate portfolio, and at some point she had set the pad thai on the floor because her arm was tired, and she had turned around because it was getting genuinely absurd to face the doors. And she had found him sitting on the floor of the elevator with his jacket folded under him and his phone in his hand and his eyes on her with an expression she absolutely refused to name. They had not talked about anything personal. Not once. She had made sure of it. When the elevator opened on 32, she picked up her pad thai, stepped out, said, "Good night, Mr. Vale," and walked to the stairwell, and then up 10 flights to her office, because she could not have continued in an enclosed space with him for another second. She told herself it was nothing. She was very good at telling herself things. What she did not know, could not have known, was that Constantine Vale had pulled the October risk assessment within 10 minutes of getting back to his office, had read Appendix C in its entirety, had then read the September assessment and the August one, and had then opened Bridget Hannigan's employee file, for the first time in the 3 years she had worked for him. She also did not know that he had cancelled his 8 o'clock dinner, or that he had sat in his office until midnight. She found out none of this. What she found out 6 weeks later was that she was pregnant. She sat on the edge of the bathtub in her apartment in Kitsilano, second floor walk-up, the one with the drafty kitchen window she kept meaning to reseal, and looked at the test and thought, with the particular clarity of a person whose brain was her most reliable tool and who needed it very badly right now, this is not possible. It was evidently possible one night. One breach in the careful, professional architecture she had built around herself. One moment in the elevator that had led, over the following month, to 3 late conversations in her office, a dinner that she had agreed to for reasons she still could not fully account for, and one night she had not planned and could not unhave. And then he had gone to London for a 3-week due diligence trip, and she had told herself, with great efficiency, that she would put it away, and she had done a reasonable job of it, and now she was sitting on the edge of her bathtub at 11:15 on a Thursday night being entirely unreasonable. She applied for a position with a risk consulting firm in Calgary the next morning. She had 3 conversations with their HR department over 2 weeks. She was preparing to give notice when Constantine's assistant, sent her a calendar invitation to a meeting she had not requested, titled only Q1 Strategy, Hannigan. She could decline. She declined meetings all the time. She accepted it, because she was apparently determined to make every possible thing harder for herself. He was alone when she arrived. The meeting room was the corner one, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the water, the North Shore mountains grey and snow-caught on the horizon. She put her laptop on the table. She sat down. She looked at him across the table with her most professional expression, which was very professional, and said, "You wanted to discuss Q1 strategy." "I wanted to discuss," he said, "the fact that you've had 3 conversations with Meridian Consulting in Calgary." She felt the floor drop slightly. She kept her face even. "My employment status is not a Q1 strategy item." "No," he said, "it isn't. This isn't a Q1 strategy meeting." He looked at her steadily. He had a way of being still that she had catalogued involuntarily across 3 years of proximity. "You're leaving. I'm considering options." "Why?" She looked at him. "I'm sorry, why are you considering options? You have been building something here for 3 years. You know exactly what you've built. You were on track for a promotion conversation in March." He paused. "I was going to have that conversation in March." Something moved through her chest. She ignored it. "I have reasons. Tell me the reasons." She looked out the window for a moment. The mountains, the grey water, the particular patience of a man who had learned that stillness was more powerful than pressure. "Constantine," she said, and it was the first time she had used his name, just the one name, and she watched something shift in his expression. "I need to make a decision that's right for me. That's all I'm prepared to say right now. That's not enough. It's what I have." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Have dinner with me tonight? I don't think that's a good idea. We had dinner 3 weeks ago and then you went to London for 3 weeks and I had a lot of time to think." Another pause. "About what?" She picked up her laptop and stood. "About what's right for me," she said again. "I'll let you know my decision by end of month." She walked out before he could say anything else. She told the Calgary firm she needed 2 more weeks. She did not examine why. She went home that night and made herself tea and sat at her kitchen table with her hands around the mug and thought about what she was actually doing. And the honest answer was that she had been invisible for so long that she did not fully trust what it felt like to be seen. It felt like standing in a room with no walls. It felt like a structural risk she could not quantify. She called her mother in Oshawa, not to tell her anything specific. Just to hear the voice, the particular solid warmth of a woman who had worked 12-hour nursing, shifts her entire career and never once acted like the difficulty was anyone's business but her own. "You sound strange," her mother said. "I'm fine. You always say that when you're not." "I know," Bridget said. "I'm working on it." 3 days later, she came into the office at 6:45 in the morning and found Constantine already at his desk, with the door open and the lights on. This was not unusual. What was unusual was that he appeared to have been there for some time, because there were 2 coffee cups on his desk. One empty, one half full, and he looked up when she passed and said, "Hannigan, come in." She stopped. "It's 6:45. I know what time it is." She went in. She sat in the chair across from him. The office was very quiet at this hour, just the building's ventilation and the distant sound of the city beginning. He slid a folder across the desk. She looked at it. "Chief Risk Officer," he said, "effective March 1st. The compensation package is on page 3. I've had legal draw up the contract." She opened the folder. She looked at page 3. She closed the folder. "You can't offer me this to stop me from leaving." "I'm not offering it to stop you from leaving," he said. "I'm offering it because it should have been on your desk in September and I was slow." He looked at her. Something direct and unguarded in it, which was rare enough that it stopped her breath slightly. "I am aware that I have not paid attention in the way I should have. I'm aware that the October risk assessment sat in a committee for 6 weeks before it was rejected on a budget line that I would have overruled if I'd looked at it carefully. I'm aware that you wrote 14 reports in the last fiscal year, and I thanked the executive committee. He paused. I'm correcting my mistakes. This is a professional offer, she said carefully. Yes, he said. She looked at him, and the rest of it, he held her gaze. I would like, he said very precisely, to have dinner with you. Again, not as your employer. As the person who spent 3 weeks in London thinking about a 44-minute elevator conversation. He paused. I would like you to tell me the reason you're actually considering leaving. The real one. The silence stretched. She thought about the draft resignation letter on her laptop. The Calgary firm. The Kitsilano apartment. The bathtub edge. The test with its 2 sharp lines sitting at the bottom of her waste bin wrapped in 3 layers of tissue. She thought about being the woman who had never made a mistake, and who had made what felt, in some moments, like the most significant one of her life, and who was now being asked to trust someone who had only just started to look. I'm pregnant, she said. The silence was different then. Constantine did not move. He did not look away. She watched him absorb it, the whole of it, the implications, the timing, the weight, with the same stillness he brought to a balance sheet with a number that didn't add up. He was, she knew, a person who needed a moment to calculate before he spoke. She had learned to read the difference between his silences. This one was not shock. It was not retreat. Mine, he said. Not a question. Yes, he nodded once, slowly. Then you're not going to Calgary, he said. She felt something spike in her, sharp, immediate. I'm sorry. You're not going to Calgary, he said again, because you don't actually want to go to Calgary. You want to go somewhere you can be alone with a decision that feels too large to make with other people watching. I understand that. He leaned forward. But I am not other people, and I am done being someone who doesn't watch. Constantine, I have, he said, been a person who moved through this company without tracking what I was moving through. I know what that cost you. I'm not able to fix the last 3 years. I can fix what comes next. She looked at him for a long moment. This is not a business problem you can restructure. No, he said. It isn't. It's the first thing in a long time that isn't. She left the office with the folder and without giving him an answer. She walked to the elevator, hesitated, took the stairs. She sat at her desk and read the contract 3 times, and thought about her mother and Oshawa and the scholarship and the 14 reports and Appendix C and the 44 minutes and the mountains through the glass. She did not call Calgary. She went back into his office at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and stood in the doorway and said, I'll need maternity terms written into the contract. Full salary continuation, 26 weeks. And the budget override for the 39th floor relay needs to go through this week before someone else gets stuck in an elevator. He looked up from his desk. Something crossed his face, fast, unguarded, almost unrecognizable on him. Not triumph, not relief, exactly. Something quieter. Done, he said. She signed the contract 3 days later. She also told him, over dinner, the 3rd dinner, the one where they did talk about personal things, finally, slowly, like 2 people learning to read a language they had only previously heard, that she had named her Oshawa Scholarship Fund after her grandmother, and that she had, in fact, read his grandfather's immigration file once for a background check and found it more interesting than most novels. He had looked at her across the table and said, with the particular careful weight of a man who had spent most of his life being strategic and was now trying something else, I have been watching you for longer than I admitted. I was waiting until I was sure I wouldn't make it worse. That's an actuarial approach, she said. You work in risk, he said. I was trying to be appropriate. You were trying to be certain, she said. Those aren't the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then, no, they're not. She looked at him, the man who owned the building, who had never said her name for 3 years, who had sat on the floor of a stopped elevator and listened to her talk about relay systems with the focused attention of someone discovering something he hadn't known he was looking for. Hannigan, he said. Bridget, she said. You can use it. He said it once, her first name, quietly, like something he intended to keep, And she thought about visibility, and what it cost to wait for it, and what it felt like when it finally arrived, not like a spotlight, not like being discovered, like being seen by exactly one person who knew what they were looking at. Outside the restaurant window, Vancouver stretched cold and lit to the water's edge, and the mountains held their snow, and neither of them looked away.